My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Monday, October 22nd, 2007, and I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, interviewing Maxine Horner. This interview is being conducted as part of the inductees of the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame Oral History Project. Mrs. Horner was inducted into the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame in 2007. She is the first African American and first woman to serve as chairperson of the Oklahoma State Democratic Caucus. Along with Vicki Miles LaGrange, Horner shared the distinction of being the first African American female state senator. She was elected in 1986 and served through 2004. In addition, Mrs. Horner is the founder of the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame and has been a strong advocate of the arts and preservation of Tulsa's historic Greenwood District. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Let's begin by learning a little more about you. Could you start and tell us where you grew up, a little bit of background on your early life?
Okay. Well, I'm a native Tulsan. Graduated from Booker T. Washington High School. And in fact, we were the first class to graduate from the new building at that time when it moved from its previous site to its current site now. But we were the class of 51, and so we graduated. I was in that class that graduated from Booker T. Washington High School, and went on from there. I received a scholarship from Wiley College in Marshall, Texas, and so I attended Wiley for 2 years, received my associate degree. And because of finances, I had to put my educational goals on hold. So I returned home to begin working so that my siblings could also have some opportunities as well. I never did forget, though, that one day that I would go back somewhere and obtain my degree, which I did much later. In fact, it was in my 50s when I returned and went on the main campus and graduated from Langston University with a degree in personnel management. And I chose that field because that was an area that I had work in the workforce, and so I was very interested in human resources, and so it sort of led me to that degree. I worked with Congressman James Jones in his district office here in Tulsa, and I also was the director of a program that was called Minority Women Employment Program, which did go out and recruit actually minority women in the area of professional positions in the corporate world. We would go to the schools. This was a national program that operated in approximately 10 cities throughout the country, and Tulsa was chosen at the time because of its low unemployment rate. And normally they would always situate an office in a school closer to the universities, and at that time, of course, the schools were not here, state schools were not in Tulsa. And so, but we would go to the campuses, but normally they would have preferred to be around OSU or in a vicinity of OU, OSU, Central University, Central State University as it was called at that time. And so that's part of my work history before I entered into the world of politics. I have 2 children, son and a daughter, and of course the love of my life are my grandchildren, and I have 5 of them. My oldest is about to graduate from law school from OU, and then I have a senior graduating this year, and the other 3 are still coming along.
Now, when you were younger, what were some of your favorite subjects in school?
Of course, I loved the arts, and so I participated in all of the drama and music, and usually had a leading role in those areas. And coming from a family of music lovers, my mother was classically trained, and my dad, of course, loved the blues, and the gospel, and the jazz, and I'd say probably more blues and more jazz than gospel. But and I took piano, and so actually, I had thought once that when I was playing, that one day that I would be in New York City, probably playing in a club, playing. It just seemed that's where I wanted to be. That didn't happen, but that was one of my dreams, and I think coming up and surrounded by a lot of musicians, because growing up at the time that I did in Tulsa, it was segregated schools and segregated hotels, and so many of the musicians that would come to Tulsa to perform would usually stay in homes. If there were friends. I can remember my dad talking about Cab Calloway and when I think Count Basie and many of them at that time was playing on a smaller scale when they would come to Tulsa. And so I was always involved in music, and my dad would allow me every summer, because I was taking piano lessons, he would allow me to go to, accompanied with him of course, but he would allow me to go to a big dance band that would come to Tulsa. And I can remember one of my favorites at that time was Lionel Hampton. And I was just excited, to be there. And I had an opportunity to, visit and spend some time with the musicians when they'd come through, because they'd kind of hang out at our place.
So music's always been very important in your life.
Very important, very important. I love music, and I love it. I love all of it. And I guess having the mom on one side and dad on the other, that I was exposed. And of course, she was pretty adamant about staying with your piano lessons. And of course, I was always wanting to sneak and play something else, and was pretty good at once upon a time.
Prior to high school, which you mentioned earlier, what were some of the other schools you attended in Tulsa growing up, elementary school?
I attended Dunbar Elementary School. Of course, we had two elementary schools at that time that I grew up. It was Booker T. Washington that was located on Easton. At that time, it was combined with the high school, the old building. And then we all merged into, we only had the one, at that time it was called junior high, and we only had the one junior high school, which was Carver Junior High School. So you either came from Dunbar Elementary or Booker T. Washington Elementary School, and then you would merge into Carver Junior High School. And that was kind of great too, because then you got a chance to meet all of the kids who were coming from Booker T, and of course they would get a chance to meet us coming from Dunbar. And then of course we would go from Carver to Booker T, and we only had the one high school that we could attend. However, being always involved in music, Carrie B. Neely, who was our choral director at Booker T. Washington High School, would put on these fabulous productions called hijinks. And so we always participated in these, and she traveled a lot during the summer. And so wherever she would go, she would come back, and I guess, if she was born in New York or if she was in the city of Chicago, then she would bring back some of the ideas of some of the shows that she had seen, and costume hijinks according to the theme for that particular event. And then, of course, we had an opportunity to travel to the other schools in Tulsa, singing with our choral. Although we were segregated, but we did perform in other schools.
Nice. Now, when you were younger, did you think you would, have that career in music, or did you have other aspirations?
Actually, my aspirations did lead me, or I was led to think that I wanted to be in music. And when I went to Wiley and was visiting with one of the counselors, and she asked what was I going to major in, and I said, well, you know, I really wanted to be in entertainment. And so she began to visit with me and say, but you know, how will you be able to, where will you find work? And she began to talk about career goals and those kinds of things, which led me to business skills. And she said, one thing about it, and I never would forget, is that if in fact you can type, take shorthand, you would always be able to find a job. And so she said that if in fact you went into the entertainment, and while some of those things might not come around as soon as you would like, she said you would probably be able to get a job in somebody's office with those skills. So, and that was a good thing. That was a good thing to have a basic foundation to pull from, which did lead me into other jobs. Didn't get to the music thing, but it did keep me employed.
Now, outside of music, when you're younger, what did you like to do for fun?
I loved reading, and I loved going to our library. We had a library very near my home, and the librarian there would allow me to spend some time in there putting, you know, books up on the shelves, or, you know, books that are being returned. I loved reading and loved movies, still love movies. I'm a real movie buff. And so I did, and did a little bit of the sports. I did run track, did enjoy track, and at that time for us it was softball. So those were some of the activities. And then of course I love to dance, and I do still love to dance.
You mentioned your family briefly. How important was the role that your family played in your early life?
Absolutely the most important. In fact, I would say that the strength of coming from my family was very important to me, and taking their training for me in a positive way, because coming up in a segregated community, my mother and my father constantly told me that, you know, we're not going to allow this to be a crutch for you. And I can remember when I took my first train ride to Wiley College out of the train station here in Tulsa. And I remember her telling me that whatever, I don't care how thirsty you become, I do not want you to stand at that fountain that says, for colored only. She said, I don't want you to do that. And I know in some of the stores that, you know, would not serve you because of your race. I can remember at Crest, you know how you'd want to go and get a hot dog and a Coke or whatever from the fountain. And we were protected in that sense that, and I say protected because she didn't want us to go through the rejection. And that was her reason even for saying that to me when I was going on the train. But she always said, and he as well, said, you can work hard, get a good education. Education is something no one can ever take from you. And you will always have that. And so you don't rely on the negatives. You focus on the positives. And we just demand that, you know, that at some point, you know, you treat people well regardless. And I think that was, those were things that really were helpful in terms, because you do see things that are unfair. And of course, even in being involved with the civil rights movement, which I was, because I felt strongly about the injustices to us. But my family, and I guess living in our community, everything was right there. We had our movie theater, you know, we had our variety stores, we had our grocery stores, and we had our restaurants, and we had a hotel in our community. And so I guess until urban renewal came along, whole things changed, as far as businesses were concerned, particularly in the Greenwood district area.
Could you touch upon your involvement in the civil rights movement?
Yes, in fact, I remember very vividly, and of course I was married at that time with my 2 children, and I remember marching when we marched downtown, and in fact there was a rally held at that time. It was the old post office building, which is the Corps of Engineers. I think it's what it is now. And I remember seeing the hatred from people on the sidelines who were angry because, we were marching. And at that time, we were involved in marching for restaurants that would not serve African Americans. And so I remember when it was Borden's cafeteria, and I remember when the doors were open at Borden's, and this was in at that time when there was the Northland Shopping Center, and when I took my son and daughter and my husband and I, we went there to eat. And so my son said he was so disappointed, but he loved mashed potatoes. And so when he tasted the mashed potatoes, and he turned to me, and he was real upset, and he said, "Is this what we were marching for?" Was it coming? Because the potatoes, I guess, were hard to him. So there were fun memories, but it was civil. It was, but you did experience the hatred coming from people that were standing, and we were told and trained that you were to not look necessarily left or right, just keep focused, because they didn't want you to break rank and get into any kind of battle. The whole point was to march for what we were saying, that justice needed to be served in the community, and we should have the right to attend all of the things that are available in our community, the schools as well. And of course, as many will know, many of our students would go out of the state because they could not attend even our state schools at that time. So we have come a long way in terms of where we are today, and so many of our young people went to, if they didn't go to Langston University, then they went out of state. And I can remember when my husband came out of service and wanted to, he had developed a skill in accounting when he was in the service, and so he wanted to go into that field. And so we had to leave Tulsa because at that time there was not a school available to him, and Langston didn't offer that degree at that time. So we went to the University of Denver for him to get an accounting degree. And one of our professors at Booker T. Washington High School had recommended that to my husband, saying that this was a fine school to attend if this was the area. He could have gotten a business administration degree, but he wanted an accounting degree. But we went to Denver and then did return back to Tulsa, and he did stay in his field of accounting in Tulsa.
Did you feel that your sense of family extended into the African American community?
Oh yes, absolutely. And of course there were just strong leaders in our community. I can remember when many of the men of the community had said that we should have an urban league in Tulsa, and they went to work to put it together to make sure that there was a chapter established here in Tulsa, as well as I can remember the YMCA and YWCA were in separate facilities, and men and women came together and said, we want to have a larger facility, and did do a capital drive to bring forth what was called the Hutchinson Branch YMCA and YWCA, located on Pine.
Now tell me about college in Texas. How was that for you? Well, first off, what was your major? What were you studying?
Well, when I, as I said, when I went through this counseling, which they did provide counselors for you to, when I went into my degree was going to be business administration. Had I stayed there for the 4 years, ended up with an associate degree in that area. That was a real experience as well, because I had never been away from Oklahoma. We had traveled, but always by car, and it was always to relatives and those kinds of events. But coming to Texas was a big change for me. And then, of course, meeting people from all over, I think the state of Texas, because it is so big. And but fell in terms of participating. I participated again, still having the love for music. I did participate in the choir. And while I was there, I was, for the homecoming, I was represented my class for the attendant for the senior homecoming queen. And that was kind of exciting because we got a chance to go to Dallas, and the game was played in Dallas, and boy, we thought we were in the big city, because Marshall, Texas is very small. It was just a small college town. And so being involved in the events on campus, and being in various clubs and organizations that were always promoting things where we could go out in the community and work in the community and tutor children as well. From a college level, we could go in and mentor and tutor children in Marshall, Texas.
Now later in life, you, as you mentioned earlier, you went to Langston to receive your degree in 1985, just a few years prior to entering the Senate.
Yes.
What was that like for you, returning to college such a later time?
Yeah, that's a funny experience happened with that, because when I made the decision, and in fact I had taken a few courses when school came to Tulsa, and it was in the state office building, and but when my son, the last to come out and was attending university at OU, I decided I'm going to go back and do this, but I'm going to go to the main campus, and I'm going to do this on the main campus, because this is the only way I'm going to get it done and get through and get out. And so my first day at class is I thought, well, I try to blend in with these students, so I'm with my age, and of course trying to look as casual as I could with slack and shirt. And so when I was entering the classroom, one young man said, get out of the way and let the teacher in. So they thought I was the teacher coming in. And so I laughed and I said, no, I'm one of you guys. I'm a student. And I was well received from after that point. So we all had a big laugh out of it. But that was an experience, because at that time there wasn't that many people coming back and entering in the classroom at that time. But adjusted very well, and Dr. Holloway was very, very kind to find an opportunity for me to work on campus, knowing that here again, coming back to the things I like to do, read, I was able to get a job in the AfricanAmerican Resource Library, which I would work there part-time in addition to my classes. And then I'd come home on the weekend and put on the wife hat and do the wife things and leave out on Sunday afternoons, coming back to Langston. But that was something, and it wasn't about going to school, returning to school to be more employable. It was absolutely that commitment I'd made to myself when I came out, a second-year student at Wiley, that I wanted to complete that. And so that was the goal. And it was put on hold, but I knew that one day I would return and to school, not knowing that it would be Langston, but that I would complete that. And so that was a major achievement for me to obtain my degree. Walk across the stage, and my family, they were there cheering for me, and because they knew how important that was to me.
So how did running for Senate come about?
Actually, I was working for Congressman Jones in the district office, and I was always talking to my friends about, and I worked in campaigns and that in our area, and I was always talking about the many things that I enjoyed about doing in his office. And actually working for the congressman was representing him in areas where he was not here, because when he was in DC, he wanted his office to function as if he were in Tulsa. So all of his aides had to go out, and you were assigned different areas that you worked with, whether it was Social Security, Veteran Affairs, IRS, immigration, however. But I was always talking about all the things and how close he was to his constituents, because when he came to town, then we had to go to the town meetings with him, and then he would also follow up to make sure that whatever those concerns were coming from the constituents, that there was follow-up out of the office. And I was just amazed at the many things that he did for and demanded from his staff for the constituents who put him in office. And I was always bragging about what a great guy he was. And so when the seat became open, one of my friends said, you ought to take a stab at that. And I said, oh no, I'm not interested in doing that kind of thing. I just like working behind the scenes, and I enjoy what I'm doing in his office. I've never envisioned myself running for an office at all. And so it's actually my daughter who said, well, why not do it in your name? You're bragging about the things that you do for the congressman. Why don't you transfer some of those things that you're doing in his office and do it in your own name? And so then when they kept talking, and then of course being competitive, and when I got into the race, and I thought, oh, all these guys are in the race. And then of course you were having people tell you, you know, this is not a role for a woman, and you shouldn't be there, and that's not a place for you to be, and you know, it's the good old boys club. And the more that was said to me, the more determined I was to try to win the seat. And of course I had to work very hard, because I was up against individuals who had name recognition, and while I've been involved in things in the community, it was always a behind the scene type of function. And so the more someone would tell me, you can't win, the more I'd say, yes, I can. And so I was able to make that run and win. And I think there were about 10 or so in the race. I think there were another female that ran. And then I ended up in a runoff with a real important name, and that was Homer Johnson. And everyone knew Homer. Homer had been quite an advocate, you know, in the community. And so then I did win the runoff, and then went into the general against another male and won that seat. And so there I was, serving in the Senate.
While you were there, what were some of the issues that were very important to you?
Here again, education was a very key thing for me. And of course, the arts, love the arts. And so I did concentrate on some of the things that I'd like to see done, funding for continuing arts in our community, in our schools. But the one thing that I think is probably I'd call it my baby, and that's the OOHRP. And of course, that took a lot of twisting and turning at the very beginning to even getting that bill to pass. We didn't do it the first year because we had to stumble through quite a few areas trying to get that. But education was, here again, was very important to me. And one of the things that I was watching 60 Minutes, and I was watching a gentleman out of Louisiana who was talking about every child should have an education in the state of Louisiana. And I thought, that is so true. And he was going to visit his legislature and see if what could be done to get this in motion in Louisiana. And I thought, I'm going to try that myself as well. And so when I went back to Oklahoma City, session began. That was my desire, was to see if we could get something. And of course, mine was a little bit different than his. One of the things that was very key to me was to reach out to families who might say, well, if I'm doing good to get this kid out of high school. And so I wanted to make sure that people could have an opportunity to think beyond high school. And I wanted that grade point average. And that was a battle because I knew that there were grade point averages, for the gifted, the bright, and all. And I said, but I would love to keep that grade point average at 2.5. And the reason being is that sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. Young people may be working. It's not that they can't perform. And I'm happy to say that when tracking that bill, once it was passed, the majority of the young people who took advantage of OOHRP, their grade point average far exceeded the 2.5. And it makes me feel really good when someone comes up and says, I'm an OOHRP graduate, and if it had not been for that bill, I would not have been able to go to school. And so that was a real challenge. And I think that the legislature now even has taken it on as a part of the budget that will be ongoing. And I think this is tremendous because the more we can keep our kids in school and reaching for higher heights, I think the better citizens we will have existing in our communities. The other thing that was important was that everyone is not college bound. So in that legislation, one could take advantage of technical training. So VOTEC schools played a major part in being able to attend VOTEC. And my thought is that you might go into VOTEC in drafting, say, but you might get so excited that you say, well, I'm gonna go further. And I'm gonna take this and go into architecture or, other areas that would require a higher level of learning. And so that was most important. And of course, that the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame became a realization. And I have to say, sharing that with the professor at the time, and I'm not sure that he's still there, was Dr. Savage on the OU campus. He came to Tulsa and did a book review. And he was talking about and this was one of the arts programs sponsored by the North Tulsa Heritage Foundation in our community. And he came and he was talking about all these various artists, and I thought, well, I know several of those that he mentioned, but I had no idea that people like Chet Baker, Barney Kessel, and the list goes on and on and on. I had no idea that they came from Oklahoma. I always thought Chet Baker was out of California, and I thought Barney Kessel, I don't know, I thought maybe somewhere else. And so I thought, this is the best kept secret. This is something that should be shared with our state. We have a national treasure of artists throughout the world that should be recognized. And when I spoke with him after the book review and was sharing, I said, as I listened to you, I thought, this is something we ought to be able to do, establish some kind of something to honor these people. Oh, he said, it probably would never happen. I don't see the legislature getting in behind something like this. And so I said, but if they did, would you work with me in a consulting way to get this off the ground? And he said, of course I would. But he said, I don't have to worry about that because it'll never happen. So, but it did. And one of the things that's very surreal for me, when I go back to when I said I took my first train ride to Marshall, Texas, on out of that train station where I couldn't drink out of the fountain, that now that we're in that building with the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame, and that's kind of very surreal for me to be a part of something that once upon a time, and I never would have dreamed that I would have been involved with having a performing arts program in that building. So that's very, very good. I didn't get to New York with playing the piano. I came close with Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame, and we have some wonderful programs there as well.
It's amazing how it all comes back around.
Yes, it really is.
We learn bits and pieces throughout our life. Describe some of the most important places where you learned the background you needed for your career in politics.
Well, one of the things that, and I will have to say that even when I entered the legislature, and particularly for the Senate, there were sessions that we did have prior to coming in, before session began. So you went through an orientation of, you have the desire of what you want to do, and this, when you're campaigning, what I'm going to do, the things I'd like to see happen. And one of the things that I think that is most helpful is the fact that you have the various, I guess you could call them training sessions, but you get the opportunity to be able to go to these various workshops all over, particularly in the area of, whether it's healthcare, education, or mental health, any of those things. You do get an opportunity to be able to go through these workshops, and you can bring back those ideas back from the workshops that you have participated in. Some of them will work, some of them will not work, because where something may be working in Maryland, it may not necessarily work in Oklahoma. But you do have an opportunity to be able to participate if this is the area that you, particularly if you're focusing in on healthcare issues or educational issues or criminal justice issues, then all of these things are there for you to participate for you. And then I'd have to say as well that the staff that you have, and particularly on both sides, really, you have young people who are, and some, who've been there a while, but the expertise that they bring will be very helpful in terms of keeping you on track in writing legislation. And so you really have all of the components there to work with you. Say for instance, if I'm sharing with you, as I did when I talked about the OOHRP bill, and when the staff person would sit down and talk with me and check to make sure that what we could do within within legislation that would be that would be okay. So you do have those components, and then I also feel that while sometimes lobbyists may get a bad name and kind of called special interest groups, but there are some that are absolutely great to be exposed to, because they can come and bring their expertise and their knowledge of what they're trying to see get passed in legislation, or a need for this legislation. And if it's something that you would say that won't work in my community, that's fine. But there are lobbyists who are well trained, and I know that there were a couple of them that actually at one time served as staff aides in the Senate that went on to become lobbyists. And you began to weed out those who are really professional. As, say for instance, people will provide you all the kind of information on when I think they were trying to do things about smoking. And so you have both sides coming to you, but you do have these advocates, and I guess rather than necessarily calling them lobbyists, you could say advocates as well, because there are advocates who come who are not paid, who do come and bring their wealth of knowledge before you. You may think you have a very good bill, and it may not be very good for some communities, and so you do get that. And plus constituents, and staying close to your constituents and making sure that these are things that even when you campaigned on it, that you stand connected with your community to make sure that you're trying to represent their needs while you're serving the state.
Now, going back, including your time working in politics and prior to, tell me about any stumbling blocks or adversity that you faced along the way.
Well, I can remember when I guess going back using my business skills, my mother was working in the home of an executive who was staffed at that time. It was called Sunray DX Oil Company there at 9th in Detroit. And he was visiting with my mother while she was working there and saying, our company is getting ready to open up its doors. We're going to hire minorities. And so he was asking my mother, do you know of some people that you could recommend that you could send in for interview, and we're going to be looking at various areas. And of course my mother said, I can recommend my daughter. She went on to brag about my associate degree from Wiley College in Marshall, Texas. And I was working at the North Tulsa YWCA at that time as a secretary to Mrs. Thelma Whitlow. And so when my mother called me and said that, and his name was Mr. Hutchison, and he said, she said, he would like to give you an interview. Well, to make a long story short, I did pass the interview, the test, and did get the job. And of course, being the first female African-American into that company at that time, you're sitting there. I was in personnel, and everyone is kind of passing by and seeing who is this person that's in our building now. And so it began there. And of course, everyone was kind of treating you, kind of walking on eggshells and treating you very nicely. Well, I decided that as I would see the jobs come through, because we posted all the jobs, and so I thought, well, here's an opportunity to advance and move up. You don't have to stay right here in this area. You can move up and take on more responsible positions. And so I did. I put my application in to bid and to go into the lease records department. And that was a whole different ball of wax, because there were men and women in there, and of course you're dealing with all the leases and royalties and those kinds of things. Very challenging, but I was very interested in learning and working in that area. So I usually took my lunch with me all the time and sat at my desk, and so one of the young ladies said, "You should come down and have lunch with us." And so I said, "Well, I will. One day I'll do that." And so I decided on this one day to do that. And so there was one lady in the group, and I guess not realizing that I had been invited to join the club to have lunch in the cafeteria with them. Once I got my lunch and came to the table, she got up and said, "I would refuse to sit at a table with," and she used the N-word. And so, of course, everyone was embarrassed by it. Instead of apologizing, said, "We didn't invite you, for this to happen." And so, I went back to my desk, and I was trying desperately, just reaching, how do I handle this? So I started reaching, and felt like my dad was on this side, saying all the things I can't repeat that he would say. And then the angelic voice of my mother, who was a very quiet-spoken person, saying, "It is something you must handle." It was just going back and forth. So I went over and I said, "If you could step outside, step away from your desk, I'd like to talk with you." Well, everyone was, it's just like looking out of their cubicles and thinking, what's going on? And so I said to her that, I'm going to be here. And so you don't have to worry about me being at lunch with you anymore. But what I will demand from you always is respect. And I said, in that we will not get into name calling, because I could call a few. But let's just respect one another, because I'm going to be here. And if you're uncomfortable with that, then you leave. But I'm going to be here. And I think she was shocked that I would come to her in this manner. And I said, because I'm very proud of the fact of who I am and the color of my skin. And I'm here just like you are. I have the right to be here. I don't have to eat lunch with you. That's a choice. And I make the choice not to ever be in your company again. But you will respect me, in our work environment. I will respect you as well. And so I think that was probably the most public and worst thing, I guess if you'd say worse. And of course, the executives called, the word, of course, went through the building and all, and I guess, well, is she gonna file some kind of suit or something? And so when they called up, and so I just said, well, it was handled. I don't need you to talk to her, I did. And so I'm fine with it, and we'll just move on. And so that never happened again in that company. But I go back to the fact that these were the kind of strengths that my mother and dad provided early on, is that, to be very proud of who you are, and nothing, and don't ever let the skin color get in the way of doing and knowing who you are and what you want to be about.
Can you go into detail about a key moment in your career that you consider one of your biggest highlights?
I think, as I think about it, I think one of the I think I would probably have to say with Minority Women Employment Program, because this was an opportunity to not only to be able to meet people but it was so exciting to be able to go to the various campuses and recruit graduates into these positions. And the beautiful thing about this program was we would go into the companies first and find out what their needs were, what were they looking for, what kinds of skills must the graduate have. And so when we would send them to the companies, it wouldn't be like cold turkey going on, because we would take through mock interviews, and we would take them, give them information on the company, so when they went in, they knew what this company was about, and if it didn't fit with them, then we would not send them. And so we were able to open doors at places like Xerox, IBM, and many of the Texaco at that time, many of the corporate offices. And I think also along with that, we were trained. We would go all over the country. The base office was in Atlanta, and we would go there for ongoing training. And I think to be able to reach out and put young professional people in employment was one of the highlights for me.
All right, when you were notified that you were going to be inducted into the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame, what was going through your mind at that time?
First of all, I was just so surprised. Well, when I think Dr. Emily Harris came to the house, she had been trying to contact me, and she came and she said she needed to get a resume from me, and I said okay, and I said, well, I get it. She said, no, I'm going to wait because I need to have it right away. And so when I received the call, I thought, this is truly an honor and truly exciting. And then certainly learning about all the other women before me, and then of course the class that I was going to be in, I was just, and I think you always are, when you're doing things, you're not doing them because you think one day I'll get a plaque or I'll get a certificate or something. And I just thought, I'm just so excited to be recognized with this, with the group of women, to be in the company of all these women who have just done outstanding things. And I don't know that you ever see yourself that this is something that you're doing that is so outstanding, because you're doing it for that passion and love that you have for the things that you're working toward to get accomplished. So it was just truly an honor to, and I just kept saying over and over and over, wow, because this is big, this is huge, this is a state thing. This is not like something out of your little club or your local thing here. So I thought this is truly honor and an honor, and it was something that I just wanted to make sure that my family was there, because particularly having two granddaughters, and I just thought, well, hopefully some of these things that they see or read about me will also serve as an encouragement for them to go for the highest goal that they can achieve.
Do you remember who presented you?
Yes, I do. Will never forget that, because I told my grandson that I knew he loved me, but I never knew all the, and I mean for him, and we've talked. Well, he's been with me. would come to the legislature with me ever since he was, well, even when I started campaigning, he was only 5 years old. And so I just thought that in fact, I wish I'd had a recording of the things that he said, because it was all I could do. My knees felt like they were going to fall out from under me, and I thought, oh, please, just let me be able to stand here and, for gosh sakes, don't let me cry. But I was truly pleased that he would do that, and I think more importantly that he spoke from his heart and not from any notes. I think that was most impressive for me.
Well, I heard it was well received, the things. I was not there, but I heard that it was quite impressive.
He was absolutely, and I don't say it just because he's my grandson, but his words to me were very, 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 very special. And I've often said I wish I'd had a recording of it, because he just spoke from his heart, and he didn't have a piece of paper before him.
How do you feel that now people look at you as a role model?
Well, I tell you an interesting thing that happened for me. We had a ceremony at the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame on Thursday, and you never know who observes you in the things that you do. And a gentleman by the name of Joe Kinney called me over a year ago and said that he would like to donate something to the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame, and he wanted to do a bust of me. And I thought, wow, a bust? I mean, what do you mean? And he said, no, I've just followed your career. And he said, and I would love to be able to do that. Well, it was unveiled on Thursday evening at the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame with the Leona Mitchell concert, which will be in the Hall of Fame. And so I thought, and I continue to think about, this gentleman just out of the blue. And so you never know how people see you and receive you. And he said, one of the things that I've just followed your career, and I just wanted to do this, and I wanted to capture your strength, and I wanted to capture what I thought I was reading about you. And so when I gave him photographs, he asked for different photographs, different places, different settings, and I provided them. And he said, well, if you want to do a younger you. I said, no, I want to do me as I am now. I've earned every wrinkle I have. I said, but he came to my home and with the mole, and then as he talked and would engage you in conversation, what he was able to capture was, he said he was trying to capture my strength that he felt from me. And certainly, he said, when I first met you, he said it was the way you shook my hand and looked at me and dead in my eye, and he said with such strength. And so I mentioned that because that's really special for me. You just would not think of an artist coming out of nowhere almost and do this. And so it will be in the hall, and so even after I'm no longer on this earth, I'll still be there in some way in the Hall of Fame. And I think with younger people and some of those that I'm involved with, just to continue to share things that I have experienced in coming up, and I had served as a mentor in the public schools because I love going into our public schools and participating with our little mentees and exposing them to different areas that they may not normally attend, like the arts and those kinds of things. So hopefully, I feel that with some young people that I am in contact with, that I do have a little bit of impact on them, and saying to them always, you know, you can do anything that you want to do. And I even look at Hillary Clinton at this point, and I think whether one would vote for her or not, but I think the fact that, and then Obama is there, that we've come a long way in terms of changing attitudes and minds about things, and the fact that we do have a female in the running, and we do have an African American who is there, along with other minorities participating. That it's great to be able to see that. But I have to say, it's really great to see Hillary Clinton be there and be able to hold her own. And that's what I try to say to young people. You know, she can hold herself and her head high above the fray. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, that I would be endorsing that particular candidate, but I always try to point out the strengths that I see in individuals to say, this is an example. This is an example of what you can be, what you can become. You know, I think I heard her say, where some might disagree, that was not, in her younger years, that was not her aspiration. Well, whether it was or not, the fact that she's there on the platform at this point, I think is very key, and it sends, I think, volumes to young people what you can do if you set your mind to it.
What would be your advice to women who plan to follow in your footsteps?
I would say, first of all, have a complete passion for, particularly if you're coming into the legislature, and never giving up, because it's your passion doesn't mean that you're going to be able to convince a full body of the House that you serve in, whether it's the House of Representatives or the Senate, is that because you have to learn how to engage people, to become involved with the things that you're wanting to get done. And I guess my primary advice would be is never give up on it. And I use that because I could have just said, okay, well, I'm not going to get the OOHRP bill passed. It's going downhill. It's just, they're tearing it up, they're cutting it apart, and they want to add here, they want to take this away. And so I would say concentrate and stick to your guns on something that is very, very important to you. And the fact that you come into the legislature, you are going to, you know, run up against opposition on certain kinds of issues. The other thing that I would say is remember that you were sent there, you were voted by your constituents, and never forget that that's who you're representing, and you have to remove your personal self out of the politics of things, and remember that you're serving a body of people that voted for you, and you should never forget that. That was brought home very clear to me when they were dealing in committee with the smoking. And I thought, well, you know, I just don't think this is something, and I started injecting my own personal, I don't think we ought to be involved in this, and people ought to be able to do what they want to do about the smoking and blah, blah, blah. I got all these phone calls and said, we have rights too. And, you know, we are coming out of your constituency saying that this is something, they ran down all the healthcare things that they felt, and this is something we'd like to see. And so the majority of the calls that I was getting was saying, we want to see, you change your vote on that. If that comes back, and we're trying to get it brought back up into committee, we want you, to realize that this is something that's very important. And I did, and that was a very good lesson to me, is that it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about serving the people that you represent, and then on a wider scale, the people of, if you're in the state of Oklahoma, the people of the state of Oklahoma. So you keep that, I think, always. And then I think another thing is try to, and sometimes I know you have to, it becomes party line things, but if we could remove some of the partisan politics out of what we do in serving, that we would be a much better state in terms of getting things done, and not just, it's always about the party this, the party that. Is that, because there are some very good, you've seen some good legislation come out with working, and learn to work with both parties. And there are some that can be to the extreme, but I think that we need to learn also how to work together for the good of the state of Oklahoma.
What does Oklahoma mean to you?
Oklahoma is great state, great place to be. And I when we went to Denver, moved to Denver for my husband to go to school there, I thought that I really wanted to stay in Denver, and would love to remain in that city. But coming back to Oklahoma has been a good thing, and I think that it's, here again, I think it's the best kept secret about all the beauty that we have, that many of us don't know about. We travel miles away when we have a lot of things going on right here in the state of Oklahoma. So I think that culturally, I think it provides a great venue for cultural activities. I think we have our living conditions in terms of our homes and things that we're able to, schools, our universities. So I think that we're more than what people, when they say, it's Oklahoma, where's Tulsa? I mean, what is that? And it's always interesting though when people come and they visit, whether it's in any part of the state, you say, this is a beautiful state, this is a beautiful place, beautiful people. And so it means a great deal to me in terms of being a native Tulsan, that and having come through all of the segregated times to where we are today, is that we have worked through a lot of things to become a very great place to be, and great place to live, great place to raise a family, a great place to educate our people, and hopefully we can get our young people to come back and stay in our great state, and have the kind of activities and jobs that will keep them here.
Would you like to mention or talk about the people who have helped play an important role in your life?
Yes, because first I would have to say most definitely my parents, my mother and dad, certainly the anchor for me. And then as I would travel through, if I'm going through my school years, then I would say there were teachers that played a significant part in my life. Again, probably the lady over speech and drama was a teacher, Ione Wright, who was in our high school at the time that I went through. And Then, of course, on a professional career, I would have to say Thelma Whitlow, who was her husband, Henry Whitlow, was once upon a time principal at Booker T. Washington High School. She was the director of the North Tulsa YWCA. And I would have to say professionally that she had a great impact on me in terms of training, because not having an opportunity to go into the work world in other parts of the city, that the things that she required you to do, the type of work, the type of punctuality, that professional ethics that I say I received from her, that would have been the person that I think kept me on track in other positions. So I'd have to go back with her. In my legislative career, I would have to say at that time that I came in was Roger Randall, who was very, very helpful to me, and allowed me to serve in my very first year as vice chair of Human Resources Committee, which was not usually the norm, you know, being a freshman. I would have to say Senator Bob Cullison as well. And then I think one of my favorites on the other side of the aisle, who is a director of the health and welfare, would be, and I'm losing his name right now, but well, let me skip that one and try to remember it. I just went blank on his name. But I would say that, and then of course, a colleague from Tulsa that we worked closely on achieving certain things that we were able to bring back to Tulsa with the Greenwood Cultural Center and the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame, would be Representative Don Ross. And then I think working with him also with the 1921 Race Riot Commission that really brought attention to that issue through legislation, was, I think, an important period of my legislative career. And thanks to him for bringing that forth. I was the Senate author on the Senate side, but he was the driving force on that issue.
What's next on the agenda for you?
Well, the next thing that I'm continuing to be involved with the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame, and we're going to be in a Capitol drive, and so we're going to be working diligently to get funding for some of the things that we would like to see happen, programs that we've had generous donors who have come forth and made a lot of things happen. We have a long way to go, I'm sure. And then in my playtime, I'm going to continue to do traveling, and I guess most importantly is that being able to spend time with my grandchildren, and I do adore them. And so a little bit of on the charitable side, I'm quite involved with the Ronald McDonald program, and I do enjoy working with that charitable organizations. That's I think a great program that serves a great need to this community. So combined with that and the Hall of Fame and traveling and the reading and the movies, those are some of the things that I get to enjoy now at my at my leisure.
When history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
I would hope that that history would record that very, very loyal person, committed and determined to achieve whatever goal I set forth. I would hope that that those are some of the attributes that I think that I have, that my strengths are that I would be remembered for those strengths of loyalty, compassion for others, and also continuing to work with our young people and trying to help them find a brighter future.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that we have not spoken about today?
I think that we probably covered most, I think.
Okay.
I guess, too, that probably one of the things I guess I would like to end by saying is that I think there's no greater service if we went back to, you know, if you were saying something to someone wanting to serve in the legislature, is that there is no greater honor and service than being able to do that. That is a high goal, and I think that to be able to serve a constituency and you have voters who believe in you, that's probably one of the highest honors I think one can receive if you go into that area, and if you go into it for not necessarily for a career or notoriety, but you're going in for you want to see a change. And many of the women that I've served with, and most often they entered because they had a passion for a particular area that they wanted to see changed and happen. And that's not to say that, you know, men do not do the same thing. But one of the things, and I go back to Freddie Williams, who served in the House, and she was a strong advocate for breast cancer, opened that door, and had difficulty getting that door open, but she never gave up. And I think that's one of the things that has to be a strong attribute in going into serving in the legislature, is never giving up.
Well, we do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us.
Well, it was my pleasure to sit down and have this conversation with you.
Well, thank you very much.